What's going on, guys? It's Fantasy Stock Exchange here, bringing you the second installment of our running back rankings going into 2021 fantasy football. If you guys are watching this video, you would have already seen our running back rankings 1 to 10, talking about the guys that are going in those first 12, 13, 14 picks of your fantasy drafts. Now we're going to be talking about that second wave. We're going to be talking about those guys that are going to be had in those second, third, fourth round areas, and who you really should be targeting, who you really should be looking at, or when to part ways and go at the wide receiver, tight end position. So that being said, Corey, how are you doing today? You ready to talk some running backs?
Yeah, I'm ready to go. And this is probably the more, hazy area of the running back rankings. Sure, at the back end of the top 10, we had some guys that are more, quote, my guys that we have a little bit higher than consensus. These guys are really the ones with the question marks that we have to sort through. And in my opinion, these are going to win and lose people leagues because there's enough question marks on some of these guys to push them down ADP a little bit. And there's enough question marks on some of these guys to make them outright bust next year. And it's kind of our job to sort through who's going to do what.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we get into the first running back of the video, we're going to hit the intro. All right, so you guys should be able to see our running back rankings on the screen. You guys can see the first name on the list, as Corey's going to get into in a second, we both have as that tier into the guys that we were talking about yesterday. For me, actually, Austin Ekeler is my RB10. I have him ahead of Jonathan Taylor. There's a little bit of a tiebreaker there, so we talked about Jonathan Taylor yesterday. But Corey, what makes Austin Ekeler the fantasy football asset, the fantasy football running back that we crave at that 1-2 turn?
Yeah, and I know if anybody plays in any kind of PPR league, they should probably know that Austin Ekeler is going to be great this year, but he's currently going off the board as the RB8, so we have him a bit lower than consensus. He's the 12th overall player off the board on Underdog Fantasy, RB10, 13th overall on multi-site, so a little bit more in line with that. Last year, he finished as the RB9 in PPR points per game in only 10 games played, despite being drafted as about the RB9 last year. So he basically finished where he was being drafted, yet you definitely were disappointed if you drafted a guy like Austin Ekeler last year because he got injured. The injury was a freak play. I saw it. It was against my team. Basically hyperextended his leg and suffered, I believe it was like a hamstring or,
great
strain or something like that. Yeah, it was a pretty severe hamstring strain that he pulled, but he was phenomenal with Justin Herbert, right? When him and Justin Herbert were on the field, 16.5 PPR points per game is what he had last year, but he had 19.44 PPR points per game with context. And when I say with context, you guys should see the splits on the screen right now. There was 2 games in which Austin Ekeler left early against my Buccaneers or was limited. I think he actually left early in week 17 as well with like a concussion or a back injury or something like that. And then the first game of the season was with Tyrod Taylor. So the 7 full games he played with Justin Herbert, he averaged 19.44 PPR points per game, was a guy up near 8 targets a game, which is incredible to see. That's exactly what you want from Austin Ekeler, right? He's a guy that's going to contribute heavily in the passing game. The only real question marks we have about the guy is his ability on the goal line, his ability to score touchdowns. And I think the one thing that is going in his favor, there's actually 2 things. One, Anthony Lynn is no longer there, so maybe they use their primary running back more in that goal line role like we've seen from their coaching staff that they have there in place coming from that New Orleans Saints kind of scheme that they have. We'd love to see Austin Ekeler used on the goal line, and that's not necessarily been a role of his in the past. And the other thing working in his favor is the improvements to the offensive line, which should make him a better runner on the ground in general. Rashawn Slater comes in at left tackle. It sounds like he's everything that he was billed to be from the reports I've seen in camp. Corey Linsley was the best center in the NFL last year, coming over from the Green Bay Packers, signing a mega contract to go with the Chargers. Brian Bulaga already there from last year has some chemistry with Corey Linsley, and Matt Filer coming from the Steelers should slide in and be an upgrade at what they had at left guard last year. So in my opinion, this is the single most improved offensive line in the NFL. The big question for Austin Ekeler is how many touchdowns can he score? So one thing to look out for in preseason games with Austin Ekeler is how they are utilizing these running backs in short yardage, because if we see Josh Kelly being used on the goal line again, that's what pushes Austin Ekeler down to this RB11 range for me, is that I don't think he has some kind of 10, 11, 12 rushing touchdown ceiling. But nonetheless, he should be a guy heavily involved in the passing game, should score a couple receiving touchdowns as well. Regardless of his targets, his value should be, somewhat improved on where he's currently being drafted. I just can't draft him over some of the other guys we talked about yesterday, Najee Harris, Antonio Gibson, because I don't believe he has a top 3, top 5 even ceiling. I think he can be a fringe top 5 running back, but without those touchdown opportunities, it'll be hard for him to get there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when you're talking about Austin Ekeler, I mentioned Alvin Kamara, I mentioned Christian McCaffrey as being those elite receiving running backs in yesterday's episode. Well, Austin Ekeler's right on par with him. You see that 8 targets per game in that stretch with Justin Herbert on the field. The main question, again, if he had those touchdowns to his arsenal, I think we would both be comfortable with ranking him as a top 5 running back. The question remains, though, if he's not used on the goal line, if he doesn't have double-digit rushing touchdown upside, it's hard to see him having that overall fantasy RB1, overall fantasy RB2, overall fantasy RB3 type of ceiling. I love the guy. And again, in full PPR, he's going to be higher than my RB10. I'll tell you that right now. We're doing it based off half PPR. In full PPR, if you want to take him as the RB6, RB7 off the board, I think that is a fine pick because, again, we're still talking about a guy that's probably in store for 110 targets, probably in store for 85, 90 receptions. It's just when you're at half PPR and you're comparing the upsides of Austin Ekeler versus Gibson, Harris, guys like that, I just kind of look the workload and the touchdown upside of those two guys.
Yeah, I totally agree. So we can move on to the next running back. And Austin Ekeler was definitely the one we got the most comments about. He's not in your top 10 in yesterday's video. Well, this was the other guy in Nick Chubb. And with Nick Chubb, you're getting a guy going off the board as the RB9, 15th overall in Underdog Fantasy, RB7, 10th overall multi-site. So the casual players, the more home league players know of Nick Chubb. He's been a staple fantasy football for a couple of years now. He's going to go a little bit higher in your home leagues, but should we be taking him that high?
Yeah, and I personally of the belief that he's a firm second-round pick, not somebody I want to spend my first-round pick on. Again, everybody knows the story with Nick Chubb. If you guys watch football, if you guys watch the Browns, if you guys played fantasy football, you know he is an elite runner of the football. And really, he's much better in real life than what his inherent fantasy value is due to pass catching limitations. When you're talking about his half PPR points per game, he's been very solid over these past few years. RB5 in points per game in 2020, RB3 in 2019, and RB9 in 2018. The problem that I have with Chubb and why he doesn't rank higher for me, higher than RB12, is that his receiving limitations will keep him from that coveted 20 point per game baseline of what we consider league winning potential. And again, I like him. If you want to get him in the second round, he's a fringe, safe RB1, high RB2. I feel like out of this whole list, if you were to bet on one guy that's probably going to finish like RB8 next year, it's going to be Nick Chubb. The problem that I have with him, again, when you're comparing the Harrises, the Gibsons, even the Ekelers due to his receiving potential, I just can't put Chubb and his, 20, 25 receptions into that territory. I feel like Derrick Henry's that one exception in that first round area of when you can take a non-pass catching running back. And look, the question that I have with him, if Nick Chubb did not have Kareem Hunt there, if Kareem Hunt got hurt, listen, we could be talking about a top 5 running back. If Kareem Hunt, let's just say in preseason, in third game preseason, ends up going down with the injury and is expected to miss like 6 games, I'm fine with ranking him as like my RB6, my RB7. The question that I have, though, is if Kareem Hunt is on the field, he is never going to have the full workload. He's never going to have the full receiving volume because Kareem Hunt in his own right is a very, very fine running back. But let's not take anything away from Chubb because you guys can see the efficiencies on the screen. He is an absolutely efficient, absolutely game-changing real-life runner. Number 4 yards per touch, number 2 yards per carry, number 2 in breakaway runs, number 3 in breakaway run rate, number 1 in juke rate. All over the board, this guy is creating 3.15 yards created per touch. He is an efficient back behind one of the best offensive lines. So I understand the decision to take him as your RB1. I just wouldn't take him much higher than the mid RB2 or mid round 2 area because of that overall ceiling limitation I see.
Right. And I think the one thing that we probably should say is when you're hearing rankings from other podcasts, the one thing you got to remember is they're ranking players based on where they think they will finish, not based on how they would draft them. We are ranking players based on how we would draft them. And that's why we have a guy like Nick Chubb behind Najee Harris, behind Jonathan Taylor, behind Antonio Gibson because of the ceiling with those players. So will Nick Chubb outperform this RB12 ranking that we have for him? Absolutely. I don't think there's any chance this guy is outside the top 8 running backs by the end of the season, but I also don't think there's any chance he's inside the top 3, top 4 running backs by the end of the season either. I think he's a very safe, very steady guy to get as your RB2 or to your second round pick if you take an elite wide receiver. in round one, but it's tough to take a guy with a 51% opportunity share with the number 28th ranked weighted opportunities in the NFL, no matter how good he is, because he's going to get red zone touches. He's going to be efficient. He's going to create big plays, but he doesn't get the pass catching work, and he doesn't get a Derrick Henry level workload like we want from a guy who is a 2-down runner, to the point that we're comfortable taking him in the first round. Because Derrick Henry has a higher ceiling than Nick Chubb simply by the fact that he gets 22, 23, 25 carries a game, and he gets all of the goal line work, whereas Nick Chubb has to split some of the goal line work and also only gets 16 to 20 carries a game. He's super, super efficient, one of the most efficient running backs in the NFL. But like Danny said, he's probably a more efficient and better real-life NFL back than he is a fantasy running back.
Yep. No, for sure. So anything else you want to add on Chubb, or should we go on to our 13th consensus running back?
No, we can go on to DeAndre Swift. And this is definitely higher than most people are going to have him.
Yeah, no, for sure. When you're talking about DeAndre Swift, he's currently going off the board. RB16, 33rd overall pick in Underdog Fantasy. RB16, 33rd overall pick on multi-site. So the consensus of the experts, if you will, or the sharper drafters on Underdog, along with your home league, is kind of in that similar area. This guy's more of a late third round pick, like mid RB2 type of guy. But honestly, I think his ceiling's way more than that. When we're talking about receiving potential, I know. I've mentioned Austin Ekeler as having that KAMARA McCaffrey level potential. And DeAndre Swift, while he may not be the next 120, 130 target back, out of all the rest of the guys on this list, basically in the NFL, I am confident in saying that DeAndre Swift is going to get a significant bump in his receiving totals. And we're going to see it. I mean, the Detroit Lions, 323 vacated targets from last year. And you guys can see that DeAndre Swift was a very, very efficient receiver out of the backfield. He had, and I quote, the number 10 target share in the NFL last year at 12.8%. Number 6 in yards per route run, and number 11 in catch rate last year. And you guys can see the tweet I've been referencing all offseason basically. But you see those main running backs. I mentioned the Christian McCaffrey. I mentioned the Alvin Kamara. I mentioned the Austin Ekeler. What does DeAndre Swift have in common with those running backs? A, he's an elite receiving talent. B, those top two guys on the list are now officially his head coach and offensive coordinator. So they know how to use their running backs in space. They know how to get their explosive playmaking backs out of the backfield, 15 plus yards down the field, making plays in the receiving game. I fully believe that DeAndre Swift has the talent to be able to contribute in that regard. And when you're talking about DeAndre Swift, we're not just talking about a guy that's only going to play on receiving downs. We're not talking about J.D. McKissic. We're not talking about James White. We're talking about a guy that is a full-fledged bell cow running back. We saw last year, in addition to this receiving prowess, he was one of the best goal line runners in the entire NFL. Despite having 20 rushing attempts from inside of the 20, he scored 8 touchdowns. And on 9 carries inside the 5, he scored 6. He just reminds me so much of an early career Aaron Jones. And I feel like DeAndre Swift is primed and ready to take that next leap. RB13 might seem like a projection because his range of outcomes may honestly be RB5 on the highest end and like RB18, RB19 on the lowest end. But again, we shoot for ceiling. If this guy is available for me in the 3rd round, and let's just say I'm picking 9th overall in your home league, I start wide receiver, or a wide receiver running back like Antonio Gibson, and I'm able to get DeAndre Swift as that secure half PPR, full PPR RB1/2. I am fully confident in that selection. And to be honest, this is a guy that in recent years would probably be a back-end 2nd round pick, would probably be a 301 type of guy. The fact that he's currently going off the board in the back 3 just makes not too much sense to me whatsoever. And for those of you that are kind of questioning, oh, what about his groin injury? He went down in practice. Like, how's he recovering from that? You guys can see on the screen, he returned to practice Thursday and apparently took a heavy load of reps. So if he's fully healthy, if he's fully ready, and he's getting those reps now in practice, I have no reason to be concerned about that groin. And when you're talking about the player, he's well worth where he's currently going.
Right. And the big questions that a lot of people are going to have about DeAndre Swift is how good is the offense? I've made it basically pretty clear that I think this offense is going to be serviceable. I don't think it's going to be the best offense in the league, but I also don't think it's going to be the worst offense in the league. They have one of the best 10 offensive lines in the NFL, which is going to open up holes for DeAndre Swift. It's going to help Jared Goff get the ball to his playmakers like Swift and like Hawkinson efficiently. I think this offense is more than capable of supporting a guy like DeAndre Swift. And again, we've seen a number of running backs, Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, perform in worse situations, in my opinion, than what DeAndre Swift is in right now for his fantasy value. So yeah, he's a guy I'm buying all over the place. I currently have him ranked as my 22nd overall player. So he's a guy I would spend a late second round pick on. I'm willing to spend a late second round pick on. If you start your draft at the 101 with Christian McCaffrey and you can swing back around and grab Darren Waller and DeAndre Swift, I think that is an absolutely phenomenal start to your draft. Or if you wanted to grab, an AJ Brown or an elite wide receiver like that, I really love that kind of start to a draft. So anybody who's wondering what's the best position to draft from this year, in my opinion, it's the 101. That's my opinion on the drafting situation. But let's move off of DeAndre Swift at RB13 and get to our RB14 and Joe Mixon. RB12 right now, currently 19th overall per Underdog Fantasy, RB13, 21 overall in multi-site. So this is a consistent mid-second round running back that you're looking at. We're not that high on Joe Mixon. It has been pretty abundantly clear throughout the offseason. I think it's pretty easy to sum up Joe Mixon by his pros and cons, right? The pros, he had an 81.5% opportunity share last year. He's going to potentially even get more volume than that with the departure of Gio Bernard. Last year, even with Gio Bernard there, he ran the 9th most routes per game at almost 21 routes per game. And like I said, all despite Gio Bernard being there, that high of an opportunity share, that high of a routes run. The cons, in my opinion, are what outweigh the pros and why I'm not necessarily going to be drafting a lot of Joe Mixon unless he's there for me like in the 3rd round or something. But the cons are the fact that this guy averaged 4.0 yards per touch last year. He simply wasn't efficient. And another big con for me is the fact that Joe Burrow is dealing with mental struggles with his ACL reconstruction. The offensive line is still bad. I know they added Riley Reif and Jackson Carman, but those are all marginal upgrades at best. I don't think they're going to suddenly be a great offensive line. Of these volume plays running back that we look at, I think there's 3 of them, right? Najee Harris, David Montgomery, and Joe Mixon. Those guys are the volume is the biggest argument in their favor for these running backs going inside the top 20. In my opinion, Mixon has the worst situation and is the least talented and efficient running back of those 3 guys. So I will take the other 2 at their current price. You get a discount on Montgomery, Harris going around the same range as Mixon. So I'll just take those guys instead of Joe Mixon. Not to mention, I also find it hard to believe that Joe Mixon, who played 6 games last year due to injury, is suddenly going to be trusted with a bigger workload than he had last year when he proved, 1, he wasn't efficient, and 2, he got injured on that workload. So another guy that screams he's going to finish as the RB10 in fantasy, and that won't win you a week. Yes, it's a return on the ADP that you're spending on him, but it's not a guy that can return a top 5 ceiling, in my opinion. That's just the way I feel about it. I don't think the offense is good enough. The offensive line's good enough. And I personally just don't think the player's good enough either.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. And we've been the biggest Joe Mixon, quote unquote, haters this offseason, but we do this every year, guys. Like, come on. Like, Joe Mixon, everybody wants to say, oh, well, Giovanni Bernard going, that's only going to create a massive workload. And then they cite how he got 25 opportunities per game. Well, if you're going to argue that Giovanni Bernard helps him in terms of his workload, don't also argue that his astronomical workload in that stretch is going to carry over and improve. No running back is going to have a 29 opportunity per game workload, which apparently Mixon truthers want to believe that's just going to happen because Giovanni Bernard is gone. That is not how coaches think. We talked about it. Coaches think, listen, my running back has dealt with injuries before. We're already giving him a significantly high workload. Why the fuck would we just give him 28, 29 opportunities per game, 23, 24 carries per game? That is absolutely ludicrous. And even honestly, he might even need 29 opportunities per game if you actually want the RB5 on the year, because that is how dang bad and inefficient he is. That is how dang bad and fucking inefficient that offensive line is. And that is how questionable a situation it is with Joe Burrow and his mentals at that beginning of the season. So he's fine, I guess, if you want him as an RB2. Say you start McCaffrey and, like, I don't know, you want him as your RB2, Swift's off the board, fuck it, go for it. But I don't know. I'm just taking wide receivers in the area that Joe Mixon currently goes, and I probably wouldn't grab him until he's honestly there in that early to mid 3rd round area.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like I said, this is a guy that I think has RB10 written all over him, and that's fine, right? That's going to return value on your investment, but RB10 is not what I want when I'm spending a mid-second round pick on somebody, because yes, that is an improvement of where I drafted him, but I want a guy that has top 3, top 5 ceilings. And to me, Jonathan Taylor, Najee Harris, Antonio Gibson, they're all going in the same range as Joe Mixon. They all have higher ceilings than Joe Mixon, which is why I'll take those guys instead.
Yep. No, I absolutely agree. So we can move on to the next name. And he's basically the opposite of Joe Mixon. We mentioned with Joe Mixon, you're getting a lot of volume. While it may be inefficient, the situation's not there. J.K. Dobbins is a complete parallel, because the main question about J.K. Dobbins is overall volume and his receiving volume. Because if you take a look at this guy's efficiencies, man, we're looking at a guy that from a pure runner standpoint, is reminiscent of what KAMARA did as a rookie. I mean, we're talking about 6.1 yards per touch, number 3 in the NFL, 5.4 true yards per carry, number 1 in the NFL, number 4 in breakaway runs, number 1 in breakaway run rate, number 5 in juke rate. And you guys see across the board, he was absolutely an efficient beast. Number 3 yards created per touch, number 1 in game script, because guess what? He's always going to be number 1 in game script because that Baltimore Ravens offense will put him in position to. And you guys can see the splits from last year. Baltimore had the highest run rate in neutral game script in the NFL at a 55% clip, and we're the 4th highest team in red zone run rate at 59%. Now, do I think those numbers are going to even out this year? Potentially. I don't think that they're going to be that much of a dominated run to pass split. I mean, heck, they were 4% higher than the next best team in the New England Patriots. Even if that split becomes a 49% run rate, a 50% run rate, as they try to quote unquote more downfield passing, like their offensive coordinator has been cited all offseason, that could really only bode well for Dobbins and in general, because that only means more receiving opportunity. And you guys have seen all throughout the offseason, you guys can see it on the screen right now, they have talked in camp primarily about getting J.K. Dobbins in space, getting him more involved as a receiver. And the Athletic's Jeff Zrebiec said that Ravens coaches believe J.K. Dobbins is capable of more and would like to get him more involved in the passing game. And Coach John Harbaugh has said that involving running backs in the passing game has been one of the main points of emphasis in this offseason. If we're getting one of the more efficient runners on the ground, who should have 10, 11 rushing touchdowns on one of the better rushing offenses in the entire league, and now has a potential increase in his overall receiving output, I think J.K. Dobbins has that league-winning upside ceiling. It all depends on what his exact target or touch workload will be going into the season. But at the end of the 3rd round, I'm taking that anytime because I shoot for ceiling, and J.K. Dobbins' ceiling is a legitimate top 7, top 6 type of running back, given how efficient this kid is.
Right. I've made the parallels to David Johnson and KAMARA's rookie year before. When you average 6.0 yards per touch in your rookie season, it's really hard for the coaching staff to be like, yes, let's give this guy 150 touches again. No, like I know they paid Gus Edwards and they gave him a decent sized contract for a backup running back, but I seriously think there's a world where J.K. Dobbins is a 70% opportunity share running back. Now, yes, Lamar Jackson's going to eat into his workload, but the Ravens running backs have had over 350 carries over the last 2 seasons, with Lamar running still for 125, 150 carries himself. So there is enough room in this offense for J.K. Dobbins to have a 215 carry, 50 reception season. And that'll be enough in this efficient situation for him to finish as a top 5 running back, potentially a top 8 running back at the worst. So he has the ceiling. He definitely is one of the more risky picks, in my opinion, in fantasy. I put out a TikTok calling him the biggest boomer bust running back in fantasy football this year, because I really do think that it is going to be feast or famine. This guy's either going to go hog wild and we're all going to be like, how did we not see this coming? This was the starting running back who showed elite efficiency for the best rushing offense in the NFL. Or he's going to be like, yeah, we probably should have known when they paid Gus Edwards and the fact that they have Lamar Jackson, that J.K. Dobbins was limited to like 170 carries or something like that. Again, big time risk, but like Danny said, in the late 3rd round, mid 3rd round where you're getting him, I'm willing to take that risk, because if I can start my draft with an Aaron Jones and then with a Stephon Diggs in the 2nd round and I can get J.K. Dobbins as my RB2, then I'm going to be willing to do that pretty much every day of the week, because I think Dobbins has that top 8, top 5 running back upside, because we really don't know what his workload is going to be. A lot of people like to pretend they know what his workload is going to be, but we don't. And I'm going to bet on the talents of the player and the historical trends of the past players that have been very efficient their rookie years, getting a huge volume uptick.
Yeah, no, I fully agree there. So we can move on to the next name on the list. And well, actually 2 in a row are your guys here. One that you are very low on, and notably so. If you guys have the draft guide, you would know this. And the next guy is a guy that you're really high on. You're really warming up to, a guy that you're targeting at his current price point. But start off with the guy you're lower on. Take it away with the quote unquote situational running back that everybody wants to hype up into a breakout. Take it away with Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Yeah, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a guy I'm very, very low on, in my opinion. We're gonna be doing bust videos in a couple weeks from now, and you're gonna see this guy's name come up again. I'm just gonna say that right now, because he's currently going off the board as the RB14, 23rd overall on Underdog Fantasy, same RB14, 26th overall on multi-site. So this is a guy that you're getting at that 2-3 turn area. Like I said, I'm pretty low on Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and for me, it comes down to one thing, and it's really just his ability. When you look at his performance metrics last year, you guys can see them on the screen. There really wasn't much of a difference between Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Devin Singletary. And I know Clyde Edwards-Helaire, his billing was Austin Ekeler, right? Like that was the ceiling. We wanted him to turn into Austin Ekeler for this Kansas City Chiefs offense, but CEH was one of those rare rookies that got this full workload right away. The one concern we had with Swift and with Dobbins and Jonathan Taylor is that they weren't thrust into a full status workhorse role right away. Well, Clyde Edwards-Helaire was. He was a guy who got 25 touches his first game and continued for the first couple of weeks of the season to get high touch workloads. And in my opinion, he lost his workload. And we always talk about the opposite, right? When you're really efficient, it leads to more touches. Well, when you're really inefficient, like Clyde Edwards-Helaire was last year, then it leads to less touches. And they signed a guy like Le'Veon Bell. And in my opinion, the correct coaching decision was made where you realize that this guy can't get it done on the goal line. He's a little too small. He can't really get into the end zone. So you bring in a bigger running back and one that's a little bit more equipped in pass protection as well to help spell the guy, because it doesn't seem like he's doing well with this workload. So that's the player. That's kind of what I believe of Clyde Edwards-Helaire, the player. Now, the situation is why he's going so high, right? I think we can all agree the allure of the Chiefs offense is why Clyde Edwards-Helaire is being drafted so high. And in my opinion, the allure of this offense is totally fake. Yes, they will be a high-powered offense. They're going to score a lot of points, but CEH is not the primary beneficiary of this high-powered offense, and it's not going to lead to some huge ceiling like a lot of people are going to paint it to be. Patrick Mahomes is a gunslinger. He ranked top 12 in average depth of target every year that he's been a starter. He's only targeted running backs at the 20th highest rate in the NFL, despite having guys like Kareem Hunt, Damian Williams, and CEH over the course of his career. And I can't blame him, right? If I was Patrick Mahomes, I'd rather throw to Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill as well, rather than throwing to my running backs, especially when I'm as talented as Patrick Mahomes is. And when we look at the red zone usage, as I mentioned, Clyde Edwards-Helaire couldn't get it done in the red zone last year. 29 red zone carries over the course of the season and 9 carries inside the 5-yard line. 11 of the red zone carries and 6 of the inside the 5 carries came in week 1 in one game. CEH was given just 3 more inside the 5 carries the rest of the 2020 season. And out of 16 rush attempts that the Kansas City Chiefs had inside the 5 and 42 total attempts passing and running, Clyde Edwards-Helaire just got 3 of those. So the allure of the Chiefs offense, like I said, they're going to be high scoring, a lot of red zone opportunities, the 4th highest pass rate inside the red zone, 3rd highest inside the 5-yard line. And they also do a lot of trickery with their wide receivers, carries to Travis Kelce, carries to Tyreek Hill and McCole Hardman, shovel passes and stuff like that. This is also a guy that doesn't have breakaway speed. So you're not getting a guy that's going to create big plays. So basically, to recap this whole argument, this is a mediocre talent, in my opinion, in a great offense. Yes, but disappointing levels of goal line work, of receiving work, and big plays will stop him from ever reaching the ceiling that a lot of people are going to envision when they draft the Kansas City Chiefs starting running back.
Yeah, no, I fully agree here. He's currently my RB16 as well, so I also have him lower than ADP has him in line with. And I just can't imagine that people are going into their drafts and excited at getting this guy at the end of the second round. Like, what are we doing here? Like, I have seen drafts where people have taken him over Justin Jefferson, Darren Waller, freaking Keenan Allen, CeeDee Lamb, and why are
I've seen him taking over guys like Harris and Gibson before, man. Like, and it's nothing against the RB16 price, right? Like, he's going off the board RB14. I have him RB17 in my rankings. It's not a big discrepancy from a running back standpoint. It's the wide receivers, like Danny mentioned, that you have to take him over. It's some of the other breakout running backs that you want to take him over. And like I said with Joe Mixon, I just think this guy's bound to finish RB11, RB12 on the season and not necessarily be a difference maker for your lineup. And like we said, we want to be drafting guys with huge ceilings. And as I kind of outlined with how the Chiefs use their running backs, and we even saw this during Kareem Hunt's prime, where he would just disappear for a couple of weeks. It's an Andy Reid thing. It's a Patrick Mahomes thing. They don't need to use their running backs the way that the Saints use their running backs or the way that the Rams or the Patriots use their running backs, because they have an elite quarterback who can throw downfield.
Yep. No, absolutely. So off the guy that you're like assuredly lower on, let's get into the guy you're higher on and take it away with David Montgomery, the running back from the Bears, who's currently going off the board as the RB17 30th overall player in Underdog Fantasy, RB17 34th overall in home leagues.
Yeah, and David Montgomery, I have him ranked higher than CEH. I would rather have David Montgomery than Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He's the cheapest workhorse in fantasy football, in my opinion. 89.7% opportunity share last year is absolutely ludicrous. Only James Robinson had a higher share of his backfield opportunities. Tariq Cohen is still dealing with ACL complications. A lot of the big hoopla about David Montgomery this year was, well, can he keep that up because Tariq Cohen's coming back? Well, Tariq Cohen is still dealing with ACL complications, and pretty much everything we've heard basically points to the fact that Montgomery is going to be this workhorse again. If we heard coming in throughout the entire offseason that Damian Williams is going to be involved, Tariq Cohen's coming back, David Montgomery want to scale back his touches or whatever. We've heard quite the contrary, right? We've heard everything from, we're going to get this guy 20 carries a game, he's never leaving the field, all this stuff. He can handle a big workload, and the coaches know that. He did it in college. He's done it so far in the NFL. This is elite volume, David Montgomery, and you guys should see this on the screen right now. He ranked 4th in touches last year, 5th in weighted opportunities, 5th in red zone opportunities. He also ranked 2nd in red zone targets last year, let alone red zone carries. And routes run per game last year, he was 2nd only to J.D. McKissic. So this is a guy that is involved on all 3 downs, too. This is not an early down banger. We know he got a quarterback upgrade, especially for his rushing efficiency, because Justin Fields, once he starts, is a very mobile guy, and he should help David Montgomery open up some more holes for him. Now, the offensive line is a concern, but I think David Montgomery is good enough to overcome some of those concerns that we have for him. He was actually efficient last year. Last year, he ranked number 12 in yards per reception. He ranked number 3 in tackles avoided per attempt, only behind Nick Chubb and Mike Davis, I believe. Elusiveness rating, he was number 4, again, only behind Nick Chubb, Mike Davis, and like somebody else. And yards after contact per attempt, he was 14th. So this is a guy that is not just a volume play. He is, in my opinion, a better version of what Joe Mixon is, because I think I trust his offense a little bit more as it stands right now. I think he's a better player, and I've already seen this guy withstand a full workload and not get injured. So I'm not taking Joe Mixon in the mid-second round because I'd rather just have David Montgomery at a round discount.
Yeah, no, I fully agree here. Again, he is the cheapest workhorse in fantasy football. If you are an advocate of the volume is king, why would you take a Joe Mixon when you could just get David Montgomery, who might even be a better player, a full round later? So I fully agree here. Dave Montgomery just getting completely overlooked, completely disrespected. And if you can get him, it's like I mentioned before, he's currently going off the board at the beginning of the 3rd round at Underdog. If you could start like a wide receiver, a wide receiver with an anchor hero type of running back, and you can get David Montgomery as your RB2 by all accounts, because I think he's going to be one of the better values in our drafts this year. And although he may not have, again, he's probably not going to replicate his top 5 running back finisher last year, again, a lot of injuries. But if you're going to say this guy finishes the RB8, the RB7 next year, I see it in the range of outcomes. And at this point of the draft, we're in that 3rd, 4th round area as opposed to the 2nd, 3rd round area where we're taking the Clyde Edwards-Helaires of the world. Yeah, give me David Montgomery. Good volume. He should be a workhorse. This offense should be better. Justin Fields coming into the fray. Maybe that makes it more of an efficient juggernaut type of offense than we even saw last year. And even last year, it was still a good offense. So overall, yeah, no, I absolutely agree. Take David Montgomery. Very good value in your current fantasy drafts.
Yeah, I totally agree. So let's move on to the next running back that we have here. And we have Miles Sanders, a guy that was a big-time darling of fantasy football Twitter and fantasy football people in general last year. A little bit of a fall from grace here at RB18 in our consensus.
Yeah, he's currently my RB19. And when we're talking about Miles Sanders, it's a little ambiguous. It's a little unsure about what exactly is going to happen with the Eagles team. But before we get into that, let's talk about his ADP. He's currently going off the board. RB20, 50th overall in Underdog Fantasy. RB19, 40th overall in multi-site. So you guys got to see, with the wide receiver fad of Underdog Fantasy, it's basically pushing him down a full 10 spots. But yeah, I mean, if you're talking about Miles Sanders, the main allure of him last year, people want to say, oh, well, he didn't get the full workload, yada, yada, yada. He was actually one of the more higher opportunity share running backs in the NFL. I believe he was top 12 in that metric. I'll put it on the screen right now as you guys are hearing this. But the problem that I have here is every single chatter this offseason has lended itself to saying that this is going to be a committee. They're going to split touches. You guys see Philadelphia's Elliott Shore-Parks expects Miles Sanders and Boston Scott basically to split touches, with Boston Scott getting the majority of the receiving load, because that makes sense. Rational coaching, we talk about it all the time. Miles Sanders was legit awful in the receiving aspect of last year. They're going to get Boston Scott on the field more in receiving situations. So I understand it from a rational coaching perspective, wanting to split up that workload. And the running backs coach himself has gone out and said that he downplayed the idea of having an every down back. That is all the news you do not want to hear if you've already drafted and you have Miles Sanders, or you're going into your drafts and you're expected to take Miles Sanders in your 4th round. In home leagues, because of his name, because of his breakaway run style, because this guy is going to have 5, 6, 7 games where he rushes for 40 plus yard touchdown. because he's the definition of a boomer bust style running back. You're either going to get that 45-yard touchdown, he's going to give you a 25-point week, or he's not going to have it, and you end up with 7.3 points on your starting lineup. I mean, that's just going to happen with Miles Sanders. He is fully, in my opinion, dependent on where you're taking him and what wide receivers you're taking him ahead of. If you're taking him at that 40th overall ADP in your home leagues, listen, I am out. I'm not taking him there. He's not a mid-4th round pick, in my opinion. So many good wide receivers, and that's probably the ADP is going to be closer to in your home leagues because people love their running backs. However, if you're getting him close to that 50th overall player in Underdog Fantasy, you're looking at a wide receiver range just like Kenny Galladay, Deebo Samuel. Yeah, at that point, okay, you know what? Give me Miles Sanders. At least I'll have some boom weeks, spike weeks mixed in there. But this is a full inconsistent RB2 at this point. And I feel, in my opinion, off of those first 17 names, it's a clear downturn, a clear tier down from where we were with the David Montgomery, even with the Clyde Edwards-Helaire range.
Yeah, and I've already compared this situation very similar. To me, I think Miles Sanders is going to be used the way that Marlon Mack was used by Sirianni in Indianapolis. You're going to see Boston Scott play, or Kenny Gainwell, whoever it ends up being, play a big role on third down, which is going to limit Miles Sanders' ceiling. Everything about Miles Sanders' situation, they're going to use Jordan Howard on some short yardage goal line situations. Everything about Miles Sanders screams like 1,050 rushing yards and 6 rushing touchdowns. Like, he's just not a very high ceiling player. I think he's an RB2 through and through. Like you said, a guy that I'm okay getting in the 5th, 6th round, but I doubt he's going to go that late in home leagues because he was so hyped up last year. He's probably still going to go in the 3rd, 4th round of home leagues because, like you said, people do like their running back. So a guy I'm probably not going to be owning too much of because I think the wide receivers in that range, when you get to the Bucs receivers, Kupp and Woods and Julio and all those guys, like, I just much rather have them than Miles Sanders.
For sure. But on the flip side, this is a guy that I guess I'm basically aligned with ADP. I actually have him higher in both regards. I have him as my RB 18 overall, and he's currently, let me just take a look, my 48th overall player, and that's going to be Darrell Henderson. He's currently going off the board, RB 19, 43rd overall in Underdog Fantasy, RB 22, 59th overall multi-site. Listen, he's not Cam Akers. We're not going to make that argument he's Cam Akers. Cam Akers legitimately had the top 5 ceiling we crave. However, if you're getting a guy that basically has all the situational factors we loved about Cam Akers, minus maybe 15% of the talent, look, I'm all for it. Top 8 offense, check. Top 12 run blocking line, check. 10 or more wins this year, check. Great play caller with Sean McVay, check. And you got a great quarterback upgrade with Matt Stafford now, check. Every single point of his situation aligns with him being a very good, very game-scripted running back to be that safe RB2. And you guys can see that this is a team that when they have a safe running back that they can trust, will feed them the ball on the goal line. And you guys can see Todd Gurley's red zone carries during Sean McVay's tenure. Corey, you actually tweeted this out. 2017, 63, first in the NFL. 2018, 64, first in the NFL. 2019, 56, second in the NFL. This also has led the NFL in goal line carries in 2017 and 18. I know it says this is the appeal of Cam Akers, but now we got to make the parallel. This is the appeal of Darrell Henderson. If he's using that situation, if he's getting the ball on the goal line, he is, in my opinion, a much safer bet than Miles Sanders is currently. I currently actually have him a tier ahead. Corey, why are you low on Darrell Henderson comparatively to Miles Sanders?
With Darrell Henderson, I don't think it's just a talent issue. It's not, they're going to use him in the same role as Cam Akers, only he's just a bit worse of a player than Cam Akers. I think they're also, now that Akers is down, going to be a little bit more cautious with their running backs. They're probably going to deploy a bit more of a committee approach. We have already heard kind of rumblings that they're going to use guys like Xavier Jones. We're still going to have guys post-training camp get cut. They could definitely still be willing to scoop up a Wayne Gallman or something if he gets cut by the 49ers. So this is a guy I'm probably not going to own too much of unless he's at a value. And I think in home leagues, there's a chance this guy slips to the 5th, 6th round and people aren't exactly sure what they have in Darrell Henderson. So at that point, I'm okay grabbing him there. But if this is a 4th, 3rd round pick, I'm not going to be in at that point.
Yeah, for sure. It's confusing because on one hand, you'll see that Sean McVay says Xavier Jones is going to carve out a role for himself. And on the other hand, apparently the Rams appear all in on him. Like,
the thing is, when Akers was the guy, that's all we heard, right? We never heard any committee talk when Akers was the guy. We heard they're going to feed Akers. And now we're hearing a little bit of kind of mixed signals from the Rams coaching staff and from Rams beat reporters. So that's kind of the way I look at it. I think Darrell Henderson's definitely the starting running back, probably 60-65% opportunity share guy. There's a chance he has a Myles Gaskin from last year kind of season. But I also think there's a chance that it is a committee approach. And Darrell Henderson's not a guy that's been able to stay healthy in the past either. So, I mean, he's kind of a low ceiling option. That's basically the way I look at him. I think his ceiling's like RB14, RB12 on the season, even with the factors that you outlined, the offense, the offensive line, the quarterback play, and all that stuff. So he's a fine pick to me in the 5th, 6th round, but anywhere before that, I'll probably be out on him.
Yep, that's fair. So we can round out this video with the 20th overall running back in our consensus rankings. Take it away with a guy on an offense that we have been down on all offseason pretty much. Take it away with Chris Carson.
Yeah, and Chris Carson, he's currently going off the board as the RB18, 39th overall player on Underdog, also the RB18, but a little bit closer in the 40s on multi-site ADP. So when you look at Chris Carson, I think he's the quintessential RB2 in fantasy. He's an RB2. He's not going to be anything more than that. We've seen his ceiling already in the NFL in 2019. I think now that you have Rashad Penny coming back from injury, he's going to eat into his workload a little bit. We also have Chris Carson's injury history, which you guys should be able to see on the screen right now. He had a midfoot sprain last year, MCL sprain, hip fracture in 2019. This is a guy that has dealt with injuries a lot in the past. And I think this guy's carry volume is kind of capped at 12 to 18 carries a game because of the way that the Seahawks have deployed their running backs. And because of that, it seems like lack of trust in Chris Carson's ability to stay healthy and give him a full workload. So he's a guy I'm just not going to find myself drafting in the 3rd, 4th round area that you're going to get him. He's a guy that I would much rather just pivot away from, grab a Cooper Kupp, grab a DJ Moore, grab a Chris Godwin, whoever's going in that range. And sometimes you can even get like Amari Coopers and Mike Evans, CeeDee Lambs, Terry McLaurin's to slide into the range where Chris Carson's going. So a guy I'm just not going to be in on in general. I think I'd rather just take a wide receiver in that range of the draft. And another thing that's not in Chris Carson's favor, of course, we've talked about it before, is his opening schedule. He has the Colts, Titans, Vikings, 49ers, Rams, Steelers, and Saints to start the season. And the Vikings and Titans are the quote-unquote easy defenses in that part of the schedule. But even they have experienced some upgrades on their defensive lines, which should make them a little bit more stout against the run. So overall, this is not a guy that I think is going to get out to a hot start. And I think you're going to regret drafting if you take him in that 3rd, 4th round range where he's going. He's going to be hard to pivot away from if he gets out to a bad start, which I think he will.
Yeah, no, and when you're talking about the Vikings, I'm glad you mentioned that. They got 2 real nose tackles coming back. I mean, Michael Pearson played last year, one of the better graded nose tackles in the league, and obviously bringing in Dalvin Tomlinson over from the New York Giants. So I fully agree here. Again, that's going to be a rough schedule. Chris Carson isn't that workhorse back that people want to make it out to be. More competition in the backfield with Rashad Penny coming back, DJ Dallas kind of showing out last year when Chris Carson missed time. He's fine. He's probably a safe RB2, but again, we don't just draft safe RB2s at the beginning of the 4th round.
Right. Especially when you can get your Chris Godwins and stuff who could finish as top 8 receivers, right? I'd rather take a guy with a higher ceiling. And this is why we talk about taking running backs early, is because by the time you get to the 3rd, 4th round range, you'd be very hard pressed to find a guy with a top 10 ceiling at running back, because usually guys with top 10 ceilings are 2nd round picks or better in fantasy. That's just how the running back position is valued. It's probably never going to change. People coming into this season probably assumed Cam Akers was going to be like a 3rd round pick, but everybody realized the ceiling before he went down with injury. So he was a 1st round pick. And that's kind of just how the running back position works. So those low ceiling options, the Miles Sanders, Chris Carsons, Darrell Hendersons, they're going to forever be the poster child of the RB dead zone, in my opinion.
Yep. No, I fully agree. So anyways, anything else you want to wrap up on, or should I take us out here?
No, we can head out of here. I think if you guys enjoyed this video, of course, like, comment, subscribe to the channel if you are new. About 70% of you almost that are watching our videos are not subscribed to the channel. So we'd like to get that number up. We're hoping to get to 5,000 subscribers as soon as possible. And if you guys want to support us in any way, if you want access to our rankings, redraft, dynasty, our sleepers, our strategy articles, all that stuff is available in our draft guide. And you can access our draft guide by going to underdogfantasy.com, depositing a minimum of $10, and you'll get $25 on top of your deposit to play with. So you have $35 on the site. Plus, you'll also get both of our draft guides for free to prep you for your fantasy drafts. You can do some drafts on Underdog, and you can also get access to our rankings. So not a better deal like that on the internet. And Pristine Auction deal is closing soon. Make sure you go to Pristine Auction, sign up using promo code FSE, and you will have a chance to win one of those 3 free signed jerseys as well.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. And again, if you have made it this far in the video, show that support. I want to see that subscribe rate go up. Corey mentioned almost 70% of you are not subscribed. Let's see that subscribe rate bump up. I want to see that closer to 50% by the time that this video is out. So anyways, we love you guys as always. See you guys back tomorrow. Actually, we're going to be seeing you guys today because you guys are going to be watching a mock draft. But peace out. Enjoy your running back rankings and enjoy that weekend. Again, we're putting this up on a Friday. You got that Saturday, Sunday. You probably got your drafts rolling in. Make sure you guys got this ready and loaded when you're about to draft.
Wire me the money.